Turning 70 should be a major milestone a day, filled with the happy chaos of family and shared memories. For me, Evelyn Vance, it began in the absolute silence of my dining room. It had been 3 years since my husband passed away, leaving me this spacious house and a comfortable nest egg we built by working dawn to dusk at our little local hardware store. I always thought our daughter Chloe appreciated that hustle. That afternoon, I called her. The phone rang 4 times before she finally picked up the loud, aggressive clacking of a keyboard echoing in the background. I suggested going out to dinner at the Foundry Grill, her absolute favorite restaurant, to celebrate my birthday. A heavy, exhausted sigh came through the receiver. "Mom, I am so sorry," Chloe said, her voice dripping with a forced, overwhelmed tone. "I'm absolutely drowning over here. Month end close at the office is a total nightmare. I won't be able to leave until midnight. I promise I'll make it up to you this weekend." I didn't push back. I knew what hard work felt like. I wished her a good night and hung up. But I refused to spend my 71st year on this earth eating a sad, cold sandwich on my birthday. I grabbed a light jacket, took my keys, and drove myself to the restaurant. When I arrived, the hostess greeted me warmly. The place smelled incredible roasted garlic and fresh seafood. As she started leading me to a small table in the back, something caught my eye in the center of the dining room. Right there, under the warm glow of a chandelier, sat my daughter. There wasn't a spreadsheet or an office paper in sight. She was wearing an elegant dress, laughing hysterically. Next to her was her husband Julian, pouring white wine. Across from them, completely dominating the conversation, was Julian's mother, Beatrice. Sitting right in the middle of their table was a massive seafood tower, piled high with lobster and oysters. I stepped behind a pillar watching the scene with a strange, icy calm. I didn't feel like crying. Instead, a wave of absolute clarity washed over me. I pulled my phone out of my purse, opened my banking app, and checked the recent transactions. And there it was. The app showed a pending charge for an expensive bottle of reserve wine run on the authorized user card I'd given Chloe 2 years ago. I'd given it to her for true medical emergencies or groceries when things got tight. I'd looked the other way on plenty of sketchy charges in the past, just to keep the peace. But the peace was officially over. I sat down at my quiet corner table, well out of their line of sight. I ordered a steak and a glass of Cabernet. As the waiter walked away, I looked back down at my phone. With one simple tap on the red button labeled "Permanently Deactivate Card," I cut off the cash flow. I ate slowly, savoring every bite, my mind working a mile a minute. I watched Beatrice polish off her lobster and order an incredibly overpriced dessert. Julian, trying to play the big shot, raised his hand to flag down the waiter for the check. The waiter approached with the bill on a sleek black tray. Julian pulled out Chloe's card with a flashy, careless gesture and handed it over. A few seconds later, the card reader let out a sharp, aggressive beep. The waiter frowned and tried it again. Another beep. From my corner, I watched the color drain completely from Julian's face. Chloe snatched the card from his hand, whispering furiously. Beatrice dropped her dessert spoon, looking around the room as if she'd been personally insulted. They spent 10 minutes arguing in hushed tones. Julian ended up having to empty his entire wallet, counting out crumpled $20 bills, and making a frantic phone call to a friend to Zelle him the rest of the money. The humiliation at their table was palpable. I finished my wine, left the exact cash for my meal, plus a very generous tip, and slipped out the side door into the cool night air. I didn't look back. I knew exactly what tomorrow morning would bring, but the rules of the game had just changed. The doorbell rang relentlessly at 9 the next morning. I opened it to find Chloe looking disheveled with dark circles under her eyes that completely contradicted her forced smile. She pushed past me without waiting for an invite, tossing her purse onto the entryway table. "Hey, Mom. Happy belated birthday." she said, giving me a quick, tense hug. Yesterday was a total circus at the office. But listen, we had the weirdest thing happen last night. The bank blocked that credit card you gave me. They said it was some security glitch. I was watering my indoor plants. I didn't even pause. I poured the water with steady precision into the dry soil before finally turning to look at her. It wasn't a glitch, I said calmly. It was me. I canceled the card. Chloe blinked, completely unable to process the blunt response. But why Julian and I were mortified last night because of you. I thought you were stuck at the office alone, I remarked, setting the watering can down. Regardless, that card was for emergencies. A lavish seafood dinner with your mother-in-law doesn't qualify. Moving forward, you can pay for your own luxuries. She opened her mouth to protest, but snapped it shut just as quickly. She shifted tactics. She started pacing around the living room, running her fingers along the back of my armchairs. She looked up at the high ceilings, then toward the staircase. You know, Mom, she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. This house is really too big for you to manage alone. It's so much work to keep clean. Julian and I were talking, and we really think you should be taking it easy. There are some beautiful communities out there that specialize in caring for people your age. I didn't bite. I simply escorted her to the front door, letting her know I had things to take care of. Once she was gone, I went to the kitchen trash can to throw away some breakfast scraps. There, tucked beneath some junk mail, I found the real reason behind her sudden concern. I smoothed out the glossy paper on the kitchen counter. It was a full-color brochure for Golden Acres Retirement Home. The photos showed cramped, depressing little rooms and sterile hallways that looked straight out of a low-budget hospital. The fine print on the back detailed strict visiting restrictions and rigid curfews. It was the cheapest, dreariest nursing home in the area. The pieces of the puzzle clicked perfectly into place. They weren't just treating me like a personal ATM. They were planning to push me out of my own home so they could move in. Julian and Beatrice were probably already picking out which bedrooms would be theirs. I decided to do a full walkthrough of my own house. I walked over to the guest bedroom and opened the door. Boxes were stacked all the way to the ceiling. Julian had been sneaking his tools, spare car parts, and sports equipment in here for months under the guise of not having enough storage space at their apartment. I went into the laundry room. There sat Beatrice's old sewing machine and two antique chairs that definitely didn't belong to me. They were slowly colonizing my space, like a quiet infestation operating under the assumption that I was too old or too clueless to notice. I didn't waste a single second on tearful confrontations or dramatic phone calls. I walked into the living room, grabbed my address book, and looked up a local moving company I'd known since our hardware store days. I scheduled a large box truck for first thing the next morning. Then I made a second call to a trusted locksmith. If they wanted space so badly, they could have all the space in the world right on their own front porch. That night, I slept more deeply than I had in months. The wheels were officially in motion. At 7 sharp the next morning, the moving truck pulled into my driveway. 2 burly movers hopped out. I gave them short, crystal-clear instructions. For the next 2 hours, they cleared out every single one of Julian's boxes, his old tires, his dust-covered golf clubs, and Beatrice's outdated furniture. My house finally breathed again. The guest room was once more a bright, open, empty space. I got into my car and followed the truck down to the small rental house Chloe and Julian leased. The movers methodically stacked the entire hall right on their front porch, almost completely blocking the front door. I paid them in cash and drove back home. By noon, the locksmith had installed heavy-duty, high-security deadbolts on the front door, back door, and the garage entry. The heavy thunk of the new locks snapping into place was music to my ears. At 2 o'clock, my phone lit up. It was Chloe. "Mom, what the hell is this? Julian's stuff is piled all over our front porch." The neighbors are staring. She shrieked, her usual sweet facade completely shattered. It's not junk, it's his belongings, I replied evenly, sorting through the mail on my kitchen table. I decided to clean house. I'm officially out of the storage business. If you guys need extra space, rent a storage unit. You can't just do this to us out of nowhere, she yelled. I just did. Have a good afternoon, Chloe. I hung up before she could launch into another tirade. I knew this little setback wouldn't stop them. Julian was arrogant and greedy. If anything, this would only fast-track whatever underhanded plan they had cooked up to seize my assets. And sure enough, it didn't take long for them to make their next move. 3 days later, Chloe showed up unannounced. I watched through the window as she tried to use her key, and when it wouldn't budge, she had no choice but to ring the doorbell. I opened it with a perfectly neutral smile. She walked in cautiously clutching a blue plastic folder against her chest. She sat on the living room sofa, slipping right back into her role as the deeply concerned daughter. Mom, Julian and I have been talking. She began pulling a printed document out of the folder. We know you were upset about the boxes, but we're just really worried about you. You live alone. If something happens to you, if you have an accident, we wouldn't be able to help you quickly. I printed out this medical power of attorney. It's just a formality, so I can make decisions at the hospital if you ever need me to. I took the document. It wasn't just a medical power of attorney. I recognized the boilerplate legal language immediately. It was the exact same kind of clauses my husband and I used to read in our hardware store contracts. Tucked inside were clear lines granting her total control over my bank accounts, property management, and the right to sell my real estate in the event of incapacity. They wanted my signature so they could ship me off to Golden Acres and list my house for sale by the end of the week. I stood up and carried the papers over to the kitchen island. I poured myself a large mug of scalding black coffee, setting it down right next to the document. That's very thoughtful of you, I said. I picked up the mug, feigned a clumsy trip over the edge of the rug, and spilled the boiling coffee directly over the pages. The black ink began to bleed and dissolve instantly in the dark puddle. Mom, what did you do? Chloe screamed, jumping up from the couch. Oh, look at how clumsy I've gotten in my old age, I remarked, casually wiping down the counter with a dish rag, completely ignoring the ruined papers. You'll just have to reprint it. Though, on second thought, don't bother. I won't be signing anything. My health is absolutely perfect. The pure frustration in Chloe's eyes was undeniable, but my attention caught on a different detail. As Chloe grumbled and picked up the soggy papers, I caught the exact fraction of a second. Her eyes darted down the hallway toward my bedroom. The moment she left thoroughly defeated, I walked straight to the back of my closet, where I kept a small digital safe. When I opened it, my instincts were proven right. A thick gold chain that had belonged to my grandmother was gone. Chloe had always known the combination. I just never imagined I'd have to hide my own memories from her. Instead of confronting her or starting a screaming match without hard proof, I acted. I grabbed a heavy-duty duffel bag. I emptied the entire contents of the safe, the house deed, my wedding rings, the emergency cash stash, and all my insurance policies. The only thing I left inside was a cheap plastic green statement necklace I'd bought at a flea market years ago, alongside a handwritten note, "Next time, try earning it." That very afternoon, I drove to a completely different bank branch downtown. I rented a private safety deposit box under my name only and locked everything away. Then I sat down with an account manager. 10 years ago, I had opened a joint savings account with Chloe to help pay for her college expenses. I'd never closed it, and I knew for a fact she'd been using that balance as her personal backup fund. I requested a total withdrawal of the funds and transferred every single penny into my private account. When I got back home, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Julian. "Evelyn, we're coming over for dinner on Friday. We need to have a serious talk about your future. You can't keep living like this." I smiled at the screen. It was time for the final curtain call. Friday at 8 o'clock sharp, all three of them marched through my front door. Chloe, Julian, and, true to form, Beatrice. They walked in like they already owned the place. Julian didn't even wait for me to offer him a seat. He swaggered over and took the chair at the head of the dining table. Beatrice looked up at the framed artwork on the walls and wrinkled her nose. Julian says this wall could easily be knocked down to create an open concept, she remarked, critically evaluating my living room. It would look so much more modern. I served dinner roast chicken and potatoes. They ate greedily, talking over one another about their design plans as if I were completely invisible. When they finished, Julian wiped his mouth with his napkin, leaned back in his chair, and adopted his best authoritative voice. Evelyn, we need to be realistic here. He began lacing his fingers together on the table. Your mind just isn't what it used to be. You're spilling coffee on important legal paperwork, throwing my property out onto the street for no reason. It's just not safe for you to live alone anymore. We've made a huge financial sacrifice and put down a deposit at Golden Acres. Chloe nodded, her face contorted into a mask of fake heartbreak. It's for your own good, Mom. We're going to move in next week to take care of the place so it doesn't fall into disrepair. There was no screaming on my part, no tears, no desperate pleas. I finished my sparkling water, set the glass down firmly on the table, and looked at each of them one by one. I appreciate your concern, I said, standing up slowly. But you won't be moving in here. Actually, I have something to show you. I walked over to the living room credenza, opened the top drawer, and walked back to the table with a thick white envelope. I dropped the envelope right in front of Julian's plate. He eyed it suspiciously before opening it. Chloe leaned over his shoulder, and Beatrice craned her neck from across the table. Julian pulled out several stapled pages. It wasn't a will, and it wasn't a power of attorney. It was a formal, notarized, and fully executed residential lease agreement. What is this? Julian asked, his voice instantly losing its bravado. It's the lease agreement for this house, I replied, crossing my arms. I've rented it out for the next 5 years to a lovely family. They have 4 teenage boys who play the drums and 3 very large dogs. They've already paid the first full year of rent up front. They move in this Monday. Chloe's face turned ghost white. Rent the house. You can't do that. Where are you supposed to live? We are not paying for your nursing home if you do this. I reached into my cardigan pocket, pulled out a glossy photograph, and slid it across the table. It was a picture of a gorgeous modern condo with a massive balcony overlooking the ocean, located in a beautiful coastal town about 3 hours away. I don't need your nursing home, I said calmly. Yesterday, I finalized the purchase of this condo. It's smaller, perfect for me, and it will entirely pay for itself with the rent checks from this house. Everything is in my name, alone. Oh, and the money from the joint account is safely sitting in my new bank too. The reality hit them like a sack of bricks. They had zero access to my money. They weren't getting the house, and all of their manipulation had done nothing but propel me toward my own financial freedom. Julian slammed his fists on the table and stood up so fast, his chair screeched against the hardwood. This is highway robbery. Julian spat, the veins in his neck bulging with rage. Your family? You owe us this house. I held up a single hand, stopping him dead in his tracks. We don't yell in my house, and I don't owe you a damn thing. Family doesn't feast on someone else's dime while lying to their face about being too busy. Family doesn't try to lock you away in a cheap home just to steal the roof over your head. Beatrice tried to chime in, stammering out excuses about a big misunderstanding, but Chloe just broke down and started crying. This time, they weren't fake tears. It was pure, unadulterated frustration at watching her entire plan crumble to dust. You have exactly 5 minutes to get off my property, I stated firmly, pointing toward the door. I need to finish packing my boxes. Not another word was said. The total defeat had left them speechless. They slouched out the door with their shoulders slumped. I shut the door behind them and threw the high-security deadbolts one last time. The house settled into a deep, peaceful silence. On Monday morning, the moving trucks arrived. I handed the keys over to the new family, smiling as I heard the joyful barking of their dogs running through the backyard. A few hours later, I was sitting on the balcony of my new condo, feeling the salty ocean breeze on my face. I held a warm mug of coffee in my hands, and there was absolutely no one waiting around for me to solve their problems. I had cut out the toxic roots before they could wither the fruits of my lifelong labor. My peace was heavily guarded, my estate was secure, and my life finally belonged entirely to me. We spend so much of our lives believing that loving your family means giving without limits and tolerating anything just to keep the peace at home. But this whole experience taught me a crystal clear lesson. Unconditional love should never mean unconditional access to your life, your hard-earned assets, or your peace of mind. I realized that you can't buy anyone's respect, and sacrificing your own dignity won't change people who only stick around to see what they can take from you. Setting a firm boundary, protecting what you've spent a lifetime building, and sometimes locking the door on the people who underestimate you isn't selfish or cruel. It's a necessary act of survival and deep self-respect. At the end of the day, your peace of mind is your most valuable asset. And sometimes the greatest act of courage is accepting that you deserve to enjoy the fruits of your labor in total tranquility, even if it means packing light and starting over.